Welcome back to the Great and Spacious Building. I'm Dr. Wayne Denton. Today we're starting a new series, in fact, our first series at this channel, and we're going to explore the origins of charismatic authority within Mormonism. We'll explain how the church's leadership and foundational stories were shaped by the social and cultural landscape of the early 19th century, a landscape far removed from the tidy, faith-based narratives often presented in your Sunday school class. To understand the origins of Mormonism and the charisma of its founder, Joseph Smith Jr., we must first travel back in time to his family's humble beginnings in Vermont. Joseph Smith Sr., the patriarch of the family, was born in 1771 to subsistence farmers. He and his wife, Lucy Mack, came from similar backgrounds. The Mack family was prosperous enough to provide a dowry which allowed the newlywed Smiths to purchase a home in Tunbridge and later Randolph, Vermont. The Smiths, like many in late 18th and early 19th century New England, were accustomed to a barter economy. Business transactions didn't always involve cash. Instead, they often relied on the exchange of goods and services. However, as the 19th century began, this traditional way of life was rapidly changing. The United States was shifting toward a cash-based capitalist market, and Joseph Smith Sr. was eager to keep up with those around him. In his quest to enter this new marketplace, Smith Sr. discovered the potential of harvesting and selling ginseng to China. At the time, there was a high demand for the herb as it was believed to be a cure for the plague which was running rampant in East Asia. Smith Sr. invested heavily, putting all the money he could command into the venture, about $4,500. He found a partner, a Revolutionary War veteran named Elkanah Stevens, who was also involved in the ginseng trade. They agreed to ship their harvests together to New York. Stevens' son Jesse was dispatched on the ship to oversee the sale. Both men expected a substantial profit. But the ship returned and Smith Sr. was shocked. Instead of payment, he received a cargo of Chinese tea. Stevens' son claimed the journey was an abject failure. A short time later, an employee of Stevens' son, a relative of the Smiths, discovered the truth. While intoxicated one night, Stevens' son showed the employee a chest filled with silver and gold coins and declared, "There, sir, are the proceeds of Mr. Smith's ginseng." The Smiths were financially ruined. They had been cheated. They were forced to sell their farm to settle bad debts, marking a brutal introduction to the new age of capitalism. The old system of gentlemen's agreements had vanished, replaced by the cutthroat reality of the marketplace. This failure left the family nearly bankrupt and led to their move from Vermont to central New York by 1813. For Joseph Smith Jr., born in 1805, this wasn't a one-time setback. He witnessed his father's struggles throughout his entire life. Smith Sr.'s story was not unique. His experience was a common one for yeoman farmers during this time. The United States was in the midst of a market revolution. Historian Alan Taylor argues that this economic upheaval led to the emergence of two parallel societies. The prosperous cities embraced capitalism, while rural farmers struggled to hold on to their traditional agrarian way of life. For people like the Smiths, who felt left behind by this new market-driven world, a new lifestyle emerged, what Taylor calls the supernatural economy. This was an alternative economic system rooted in treasure-seeking and occult practices. It promised a quick path to wealth and a sense of power over a world that seemed increasingly out of their control. The supernatural economy became a unique culture for agrarian Americans to set themselves apart from those urban city dwellers. The senior Smith fully embraced this supernatural economy. He was known in his community as a skilled rodsman. A rodsman used a forked branch, typically made of witch hazel, to locate buried treasure, lost items, or even water. This practice, common since the 16th century, was highly respected amongst those who believed in this counter-capitalist culture. In 1800, the same year his ginseng business failed, Smith Sr. joined a group of rodsmen in Middlebury, Vermont. This was no ordinary group of treasure seekers. They followed a charismatic leader named Nathaniel Wood, who had been excommunicated from his local congregational church. And with this, he formed his own sect, the New Israelites. Under Wood's leadership, the group practiced pretty unorthodox supernatural gifts, including the use of divining rods, and they believed that the end times were near. The group's leaders prophesied an earthquake on January 14, 1802, which would be a sign of a destroying angel's arrival. They believed God would spare the worthy. This apocalyptic message caused widespread panic in the small town, and the militia was called in. When the day passed and the world remained unchanged, the prophecy was a clear failure. Despite the embarrassment, the group's leaders held on to their beliefs and moved to upstate New York. Decades later, a newspaper editor named Barnes Frisbee connected this event known as the Wood Scrape directly to Joseph Smith Sr. Frisbee wrote, based on accounts from over 30 local residents, that both Smith Sr. and William Cowdery, the father of future Book of Mormon scribe Oliver Cowdery, were part of this group. In his account, Frisbee stated, "It is my honest belief that this Wood movement here in Middleton was one source, if not the main source, from which came this monster, Mormonism." By 1813, the Smiths had relocated to Palmyra, New York. In this new home, they continued to embrace their family bonds and the supernatural economy. They took on odd jobs, including being hired hands for other landowners and offering their skills in treasure hunting. Joseph Smith Sr. brought his expertise in divining with him to central New York. A Palmyra native, Peter Ingersoll, recounted in an 1833 affidavit that he became acquainted with the Smith family in 1822. He stated the general employment of the family was digging for money. Ingersoll described how Smith Sr. asked him to test a mineral rod. During this demonstration, Joseph Smith Sr. noticed a stone that Ingersoll was idly tossing and excitedly grabbed it and proclaimed that stone was of great worth. He then placed the stone in his hat in the middle of a field, covered his face, and emerged saying to Ingersoll, "If you knew what I had seen, you would believe." Ingersoll also noted that Joseph Smith Jr., along with them that day, then took the hat and stone and replicated the act, and was equally astonished. The family's matriarch, Lucy Mack Smith, confirmed their involvement in these magical practices, stating that they went at trying to win the faculty of Abrach, drawing magic circles, or soothsaying. However, she insisted that this was not a distraction from their work, but a pursuit intertwined with their quest for spiritual salvation. This fusion of a magical worldview with religious desire became the central aspiration of Joseph Smith Jr. Now let's turn to the event that the LDS Church identifies as the foundation of its faith, the first vision. The official narrative portrays a young Joseph Smith seeking to know which church to join, who is visited by God and Jesus Christ in the woods behind his Palmyra farm. This is the core story of the Restoration. However, official records often omit his involvement in folk magic. The first vision, first written down in 1832, 2 years after the church was founded, had 9 different accounts, with 4 being first-hand versions from Smith himself. These accounts evolved over time, with later versions adding details not present in the earlier ones. The 1832 account, for instance, is the most personal and basic, seamlessly transitioning from his prayer to being in God's presence. In contrast, the later accounts, such as those from 1835 and 1839, introduce a struggle with a malicious force that binds his tongue and threatens him with sudden destruction before heavenly visitors appear to save him. This struggle between good and evil, a theme absent from his first account, is a crucial detail. It transformed a simple divine encounter into a dramatic battle, framing Joseph Smith as a figure of immense spiritual power. Despite his encounter with God in 1820, there's no evidence Smith talked about the first vision publicly until 1832, long after he had already established a reputation as a seer. His journey from a farm boy to the leader of a new religious movement was not driven by the first vision, at least not initially. Instead, it was inextricably linked with his deep involvement in the cultural practice of treasure seeking. He started by using a divining rod, but his true fame came from his abilities as a seer. The concept of a seer was a powerful one on this day, traced back to the figures like John Dee and Edward Kelly, who believed they could communicate with spirits through stones or other objects. This tradition, which linked occult practices with Judeo-Christian history, made using a peepstone a legitimate religious experience for many. A young Joseph Smith was so infatuated with the idea of seers that he reportedly asked his parents for permission to visit a local seer named Sally Chase. Chase had a glass stone that helped her to locate lost objects in the vicinity. Using her stone, Smith had a vision of his own seer stone, one specifically for him, a stone that shone brighter than anything else while he looked into her stone. He was told that the stone was on the shoreline of a tributary to Lake Erie. This vision was a prophecy come true for Smith, as his father had long spoken of a stone his son would find to, quote, see all over the world. Smith would eventually find this stone, which physician William Purple described as about the size of a small hen's egg and the shape of a high instep shoe. With layers of different colors, a second stone was later discovered by Smith while digging a well for Willard Chase. This one was obtained through a little bit of trickery on Smith's part. Chase's affidavit detailed how Smith had borrowed the stone. When asked to return it, he refused, and with a malignant look in his eyes, he said, "I don't care who in the devil this stone belongs to, you shall never have it." With these seer stones in his possession, Smith's reputation as a charismatic treasure seeker began to grow. Between 1822 and 1827, he was actively involved in at least 18 documented treasure digs, working for various employers as both a digger and a seer. He worked for Joshua Stafford, Clark Chase, and Benjamin Tabor, searching for everything from hidden chests to golden furniture in the ground. He even helped Randall Robinson search for gold plates on his property. Between 1825 and 1827, he participated in many more digs for individuals like Josiah Stowell and Joseph Knight Sr. And yet, by all accounts, Joseph Smith never found any of the treasures he sought. This repeated failure, however, did not diminish his credibility as a seer. The magic worldview had built-in explanations for failure. Treasure was slippery and could move, or a dig could fail because a specific word wasn't said or a heart wasn't pure at the dig site. These explanations actually bolstered his reputation despite failure. His charisma was so strong that even when he was put on trial in 1826 for being an imposter who defrauded his employer, Josiah Stowell, the outcome was remarkable. When questioned, Stowell testified that Smith was an honest man and that he would happily hire him again. Stowell, being a practitioner of folk magic himself, saw nothing wrong with Smith's actions. The seer had surrounded himself with a community that shared his worldview and was comfortable with his practices. This is the key takeaway for today's episode. Joseph Smith's charisma and his ability to attract a following were not rooted in the traditional Judeo-Christian religious narrative we've come to know. Instead, his initial power came from his reputation as a folk magician and a seer within a society that was struggling to adapt to a changing economic landscape. His early followers believed in him because of his perceived magical abilities, not because of his claims of heavenly visitations. In our next episode, we will explore how Joseph Smith took this established reputation as a folk magician and brilliantly capitalized on it, transforming his magical support into the foundation for a new religion. Thank you so much for joining me, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss future installments of The Great and Spacious Building. I'm Dr. Denton. Have a great night, and I will see you all next time.